Welcome to the RGA Members Podcast, where we elevate professionals in our network one guest at a time. My name is Matt Coots. I'm the COO of RGA Network. RGA is a membership organization for business professionals. We are a connection and relationship organization focused on providing tools, education, and growth opportunities to our members. I'm here today to introduce our member, John Kuder of Kuder Consulting Group. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, what business Kuder Consulting Group is in, and we can start off there.
Okay. A little bit about myself. That's a hard place to start because it's been a few years since I was born, but how much time have you got?
As much
I
as it
joined,
takes.
I'm going to
That's how much
say,
time.
since you talk about RGA and we are this RGA, I'm going to say I joined RGA a little over a year ago, and it has been it's just a fantastic growth opportunity. You mentioned growth, and it's unlike many people, I haven't done a lot of networking in my career. And most of my career was in a small family business. I was third generation in a small family agriculture business. So we didn't have a lot of customers to deal with in that business. And and so I didn't do there wasn't a lot of networking to be done in that particular industry. It was a very small, closed industry. Then I did a different kind of networking, and I just kind of recognized that as networking. I also had a sideline where I was managing the division of another fellow's business for him as a consultant, and that was a combination of customer support and writing a monthly newsletter and customer education and a whole lot of things. It was in the days before we had screen sharing, so I used to get on the phone with people, and they were asking me how to fix a problem in Windows, and well, tell me what's on your screen, and that whole thing. So, in a way, that was networking. But fast forward to today, yeah, we live here in Tampa and had not just built a big circle, and RGA has completely changed that. And it's been just a wonderful place to also explore new ways of describing what we do and so on. So, what we do, that is actually a little bit challenging to describe because we are small family business specialists, and there's not many of those around. And we help the owners of small family businesses that are like in the position that I used to be in, deal with the challenges of small family business ownership and the family dynamics within the business. Small business owners of all kinds, of all different kinds of businesses, face challenges, right? They have growth challenges through a process of oftentimes being a solopreneur and then taking on employees, and that changes things, and then growing, if they're lucky enough, growing bigger and having more employees and maybe a layer of management. And each growth step, they're farther removed or maybe completely removed from dealing with their customers. And so they have to adjust how they think, how they behave, and how they communicate at each stage of growth. And that's where we can help them because there are really books out there that teach that. There aren't courses. And then when you layer in the family business, now you've got the family dynamics, you've got the effect of parenting that has taken place at some point in the past or may still be going on in the business. And as a parent, sometimes our children show us our potential mistakes that we made as parenting, the things that we might have missed. And that can be hard to see. And so when that shows up in a business environment, wow. But the other side is that the family relationships uh, are an unbreakable bond in many ways. And so when you have that 24/7 support and that love that isn't unconditional love, it's a very different dynamic also than just an employee-employer relationship. In our business,
Absolutely.
we we have a podcast where we are interviewing and celebrating small family businesses. And we interviewed a father and son today, and they have been very successful in growing their business. The current business is about 20 years old, and it's a follow on from a previous business, but they have some wonderful things to say about how the family relationships are the most rewarding part of the business, but also the most challenging. And that's how it goes. So
Yeah,
what
and
we,
let's dive into that for a
yeah,
second. Let's dive a little bit further. First off, both yourself and your wife Constance, or as we call her Connie, who you both have a background right in the small business world, as you mentioned there. You both come from multi-generational, and that's what kind of led you down this path. Then you also have gone and you've taken, obviously, you've worked with clients and all that, but you also have an entire program and system that you use to help people work through this. So having that accumulated background, having that framework, having the show where you're interviewing people and then the clients, obviously, that you have as well, what would you say are like the top three challenges that small family businesses run into? I know you mentioned them right there briefly, but I wanted to do two things. I wanted to say, what are the three top challenges? And maybe what are one or two of because we don't want to just scare people out of multi-generational businesses. So what are a couple of the challenges? And then what are a couple of those strengths? Like you mentioned, having that 24, that sense of real family dynamic and strength. So I'm sure we have a couple of those as well, but let's start with the challenges. What are those top challenges, would you say?
uh, in a broad sense,
Sure.
communication is a big challenge, and it has many layers, but I'm just going to pick one that came to mind. With a family, we've got a relationship that's goes back a long time with a family member, and it's very easy for us to, in fact, it's natural for us to form an image of that person, and it's this average of our interactions with that person and how they've been over a period of years. But it's usually based on some point in the past. Like it's very easy for an adult parent to think of their child as the child they remember when they were in high school before they left the home, and to hold that image in mind when they're dealing with them. And so that can be a real impediment to communication. Seeing,
Absolutely.
especially in the workplace, well, one of the couples father daughter we talked to recently, they actually went through that experience of, I guess it was her brothers started calling dad by his first name, like instinctively in the workplace. And they both were immediately taken aback at first, said, "Huh?" And then they realized, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." And so that's one of the ways that they drew those lines and separated the family from the business part was with names. Another family actually had hats made, and they had a hat that said dad and a hat that said boss. And when they needed to change rules, they would change the hats and have the conversation wearing the
That's
hats
fun.
that they could actually see, which I thought was brilliant. But yeah, communication and clarity of roles, and when which roles are in focus at the time, because that's another. So challenge number two of family business is the 24/7 nature. Oftentimes family is living close to each other, close proximity. They're interacting after work as well as during work, and so it bleeds over. And so they're talking business during family time, and their family stuff comes up during business time. And if there's not an intentional design of some way of calling time out or separating those things that everybody agrees upon, it can be overwhelming.
Kind of the no shop talk at dinner
Yeah,
type of.
yeah, exactly. Exactly, or
Yeah.
turning off phones, making everybody take their phone and leave their phones out of the dining room
Right.
or whatever. There
Yeah.
just have to be. And so I'll say, so we were talking about communication and roles. Now, another aspect of roles is a big one, and that is the especially with the second or following generations, their role in the business as earning their place, I'll call it.
Mhm.
Having clear roles like, what is my job description? Okay, that's one, because I can tell you from personal experience, son is not an effective job description. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, so having really clear job descriptions, but also that the younger generation basically has to work their way up or somehow earn their place. They have to compete for the job and qualify for the job in the same way that anyone that would be hired in from the outside of the business. That's a really healthy thing for the business. Again, the father son we were talking to this morning, we were asking about that, and they said, yeah, he just started at the bottom and had to work his way up, and that earns that earns respect and it earns experience. And that person has that experience, the same experience that everybody that later is working for them has. And by the way, this guy occasionally, this was a transportation company. So I said, "You ever get back in the truck?" He said, "All the time." The employees that are non-family members have a great respect for that person because he not only knows how to do their job, but he still occasionally does it. And that reduces that sense of nepotism. Big word there. Sorry.
100%.
That family privilege.
Yeah, that's definitely important. I would assume if it's a company that's not just family, when there's other people that are involved that have probably been there longer than the child could have even been there.
Oh yeah.
So,
I was a only son in a family business. And we, at that time we had an egg farm and I was the boss's son. So people were little bit leery. They were careful how they treated me, which sometimes was nice. But I also had experiences where they would step back and let me, if we were working, doing a bunch of we were loading trucks. So we were loading crates of eggs on trucks. And it took 723 crates of eggs to load a truck. And there were several trucks that I probably loaded 2/3 of the eggs where with someone else where they just slowed down and let me go.
right.
But I also earned their respect by doing that.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about what some of the strengths are then in that same setting.
Strengths and weakness is a funny label because what can be a strength can also be a weakness and vice versa. What we label sometimes as a weakness can be a strength when it's applied in a certain focus or different situations. Having said that, the fact that family members know each other so well and they know that they can, for the most part, okay, there are dysfunctional families, and so I should say freedom of choice is a big deal. That was another success factor that we found in the interview we had today was the son was he said, "I've heard probably a million times, you don't have to be here. You stay if you want, if you don't want to be here, go somewhere else." It's not get out, but it was like, if this isn't making you happy, we want you to be happy first. That's more important. And I like to say the family, but family lasts longer than a business. A business can change, it can be sold, it can end, whatever, but the family relationships still go. So that I think you have to prioritize the family, but it's the strength. It's knowing that at the end of the day, we can disagree, we can fight, but we're going to get over it and we're still going to be family. And I've heard that so many times.
Okay. Very cool. Obviously, you've got some serious experience in that, and RGA is the perfect grounds for you to work with specifically owner operators and individuals that are in this business world.
Can I touch on that just a
Especially,
minute?
please. Yeah.
So the owner, the reason that we like to focus on the owners, I know there's many different flavors of consultants and coaches, and we do. I don't think of those things as titles as much as tools because we do some consulting, we do some coaching, and they have different places. And when
So,
blended together, they fill a big area. But I just lost my train of thought. Help me.
so RGA, a lot of owners, operators, a lot of
Oh, the owner.
there.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
The reason that we focus on the owner is that the owner is at the center of the business. And I said earlier, we think, we behave, we communicate, right? It's in that order. So many times when we perceive a problem, what we see is the symptoms of a problem. And when we track it back, it's almost always comes back to somewhere to the behavior of a human at the core of it. It's not that there's anything wrong with that person. It's behaviors are just a behavior and they can be changed easily. So you take that principle, now you apply it to a bit, you look at a business. What's the highest leverage point in a business? If you want to do something that has the biggest effect throughout the business, it's at the point of the owner because the owner is the kind of the blood supply in one sense, an energetic sense of the business, and they affect everything. They impact everyone through a ripple, right? And so if we can just make a small shift in some way that the owner's thinking or make a little adjustment to how they communicate, it can shift the whole culture and the profitability of the business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, I did a podcast episode yesterday with Christy Berry. And one of the things that we were talking about was because she works very holistically. And oftentimes in the medical profession, they treat symptoms versus the root causes of situations.
Yes.
And so she was talking about the importance of really getting to the roots of the issues. And while you were talking about that, kind of is what came to mind with me as well. That starts in the business culture and the business world. It starts with the person who's setting the tone for the entire organization, which is typically going to be your CEO or your president or whoever the owner of the company is, and who's on the front lines, but also who's the one paying the bills and making the decisions at the end of the day. That all makes complete sense. Okay, let me, because we're about 18 minutes. So let me ask you if you could go back in time, and this is one of my favorite questions, and give yourself some practical business advice, a younger version of yourself, what would that advice be? It's a good one.
It is a good one.
That's why I
It
like it.
is a good one. And it's apropos, and there's 2 or 3. I'm trying to just pick one. And I wanna say it and it may bleed into more than one, but it would be, don't take things personally. Okay. That is, we all have habits, and that was a habit that I developed, learned, I'll say, copied. But yeah, taking things personally and being hard on myself has held me back for a lot over my life. And uh, there's 2 or 3 interwoven frameworks that we work with that changed everything for me when I learned and applied those things. And so the one that's probably the simplest to talk about is the difference between confidence and self-confidence. And they're both often used interchangeably. And yeah, people, say the same, they think they're saying the same thing when they talk about having confidence or self-confidence, but there's a really clever and simple distinction. And that is that confidence is comes from other people observing you doing something well, applying a skill, or behaving in a certain way, and they compliment that, and it feels good, and it makes, that's confidence. It's, I liken it to rain, but it becomes, then that fades away. Whereas self confidence is one's own recognition of those successful application of skills or knowledge and doing things successfully. And that is something that is self-reinforcing, and they work together. It's not an either or. It's when something happens that where somebody pays us a compliment or acknowledges something that we've done and says, "Wow, great job." We want to take that good feeling and that piece of that, and we move it over into the self-confidence bucket and put it on a. I like to suggest that people have a accomplishments journal. I keep one myself, and I make this list of things that I've done well, or that I'm proud of. And so we all have those times when we feel imposter syndrome, or we feel like, man, I'm just not keeping up, or something like that. We get down, right? And if you've got that list to go to, I did that and I did that. Hey, now, so external and internal, that's that distinction, and learning to, and that's a skill. It's not just I know this now, and okay, now I know the difference between these two terms. Not at all. It's a skill to be practiced and implemented, and it's a muscle that you build, and then it becomes a real strength.
Very
So
cool.
there's a freebie.
So external confidence, internal confidence.
External and internal is also, yes, very apropos there. But I'll say the internal, like the self-confidence, can still be externally verifiable, right?
Mhm.
That's another piece. It's important that you be able to have verifiable data to say, if I have a certain skill level, that's demonstrable, right? Because anybody can just sit in a chair and say, I'm a genius, or I'm great at this. And if they can't demonstrate
Right.
that, it's just,
100%. And we live in the United States here in a free market capitalist society. So for entrepreneurs in particular, it's pretty easy for them to demonstrate that skill and to build that self-confidence, because when you go out to the marketplace with your product idea or concept, if the market responds favorably, then you know that you've done something and accomplished something, or at least you have the seeds to do it, right? So it's
Exactly.
something that you can, with practice and figuring things out, you can definitely get out there and do that. One of the things that I always say, I would tell myself is, don't be afraid to just go. Like, you may not have it all figured out, but sometimes you just got to go, because you're not going to know how your idea, you may think you have the greatest idea in the world. And this has happened to me before, right? You may think you have the greatest idea in the world. You get it out there and all of a sudden you're like, no, I definitely have to make some changes to that. That did not work out the way I had anticipated. And
Yes.
you can't, and you have to, going back to your confidence situation, right? You have to be able to, willing to take those body blows, to put yourself out there and your ideas and concepts out there, trusting that you're going to learn from the process, right? And you're going to refine from the process. So,
Exactly. In fact, yeah, starting sooner, start
yeah.
getting that minimum viable whatever,
MVP,
and
yeah, minimum viable product. Yep.
and get out there and let the market tell you something about it, because everything you do is going to inform you, and you're going to get data and feedback that you couldn't come up with on your own, and so it's going to guide you're going to actually improve faster by getting out there, and failure is a requirement. Failure is not
Yeah.
an ending. It's not a result. It's not a destination. It's a requirement to achieve success.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we talk about with RGA, is that RGA is a great opportunity for people to, in a relatively soft environment, to get out there and see how the market's going to react to a product or idea or concept, or even marketing, even how you're presenting yourself.
Just that I would say the
So,
30-second
yeah,
30-second intros that we do at every meeting and the 10-minute presentations that we have the opportunity to give are both outstanding opportunities to keep testing ideas. I've done in my year plus, I've probably done 20 or 30 different versions of my 30 seconds. Sometimes it changes a little
yeah.
bit from week to week. And my same with a 10-minute presentation. I don't give the same one more than 3 or 4 times before I've changed it somehow significantly.
I do this within RGA itself. I will beta release or pilot release different programs into the RGA community and see which ones actually have the most appeal to the members before I fully invest in something and make it open to everybody. I'll go to a test group, which usually ends up being our leadership teams for the different meetings. All right, John, let's do this. Why don't you tell everybody where they can get a hold of you? If they have any questions, if they want to learn more, obviously they can find you on the RGA Network.net directory listing, but where can they find you in?
They can find us at our website, Kuder.com. That's Kuder is the spelling. We also have a YouTube channel where we have a number of videos, including our podcast. And our podcast is called Celebrating Small Family Businesses. So search for that. We'll turn up many of the the audio platforms as well as YouTube.
Awesome. Our mission here at RGA is to help empower our business community. This podcast is an important part of our mission because it gives you and all the rest of our members a platform to promote and share their business, their story, their mission. So thank you, John, for participating today.
My pleasure.
All things RGA can be found on our website at www.rganetwork.net or any of your preferred social media channels. So we will see all of you again soon on the next podcast. And John, I'll see you at a meeting soon.
Yes, you will.